Story 1. Hey, so my name's Ethan, and this whole thing happened when I was a sophomore at a university in Seattle. I just finished my freshman year, but I didn't get a dorm spot for the next one, so I was kinda scrambling to find a place to live. Off-campus housing was a mess to figure out, but I ended up in this cheap apartment complex on the outskirts of the city, maybe a 20-minute bike ride from campus. It wasn't perfect, but it was all I could afford. And honestly, I didn't mind the ride. The complex had 3 buildings, all kinda old and creaky, mostly filled with students like me, though there were a few older folks too. Some grad students, a couple of TAs, and even a few people getting their degrees later in life. It felt like a weird little community, not super tight-knit, but everyone just did their thing. Among all these people, though, there was this one guy who stuck out from the start. An older man, maybe in his 60s, who lived in one of the other buildings. I'm gonna call him Frank, though I never actually got his name back then. Frank was off. He had this gray hair, a bit messy, and his eyes always looked empty, like he was staring through you, not at you. He moved slow, almost like he was carrying some old injury, and he never said much. Most of the time, he kept to himself, just drifting around the complex like a ghost. I figured he had some tie to the university, maybe a retired professor or something, but no one ever explained, and I wasn't the type to go digging. At first, I didn't think much of him, just another weird neighbor, right? But then I started noticing things. The first time it really hit me was in the shared lounge area in my building. It's this dingy space with a couple of couches and a coffee machine, where people would hang out or grab a snack. The other buildings had their own lounges, so there was no reason for Frank to be in ours. But there he was, just standing in the corner, not eating, not talking, not even pretending to be there for a reason. A bunch of us were in there, laughing, making instant noodles, blasting some music, but Frank didn't join in. He just stood there, watching us with that blank stare. I caught his eye once or twice, and I swear, it felt like he was zeroing in on me, though I told myself I was probably imagining it. No one else seemed to notice him, which made it weirder. Like, was I the only one creeped out by this guy? It gave me this uneasy feeling like I was being studied. A few days later, it got worse. I was in my room one night, working on some homework, when I glanced out my window. It was dark, maybe 9 or 10, and there was Frank, standing in the parking lot below, staring up at my window. Not the building, my window. My room's on the 3rd floor, so it's not like he was just passing by. He was out there, alone, in the cold, just looking. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to do, so I did something dumb. I waved at him, trying to be friendly, or maybe just to break the tension. Big mistake. The second I did, his face changed. He didn't wave back. Instead, he shuffled quickly toward his building, almost like he was excited that I'd noticed him. I sat there, heart racing, feeling like I just made myself a target. That's when I started wondering, was he watching me this whole time? So, after that night with Frank staring up at my window, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was being watched. It was like he was always there, just out of sight, waiting for me to notice him again. I tried asking some of the other people in the apartment complex about him, figuring someone had to know something, but all I got was vague stuff like, "Oh, he's always been around," or "Just ignore him, man." No one seemed to know who he was, not really. One guy, a senior who lived in Frank's building, said he was tied to the university somehow, maybe a relative of the property manager, but he was a bit off and harmless. Harmless didn't feel right though, not after that look in his eyes. I wanted to push for more answers, but nobody cared enough to talk, and I felt like I was the only one freaking out. It made me feel so alone, like I was overreacting to something everyone else had just accepted. Things started getting weirder after that. One night, I came back from class and found my apartment key missing. It wasn't a big complex, and we all had these old school locks on our doors. I always kept my key on a lanyard, so losing it was a huge deal. I felt exposed without it. I used my spare, but I couldn't stop wondering if I dropped it somewhere or if someone had taken it. Then, a few days later, I was heading to the bathroom around midnight, and there was Frank, standing in the hallway right outside my door. I froze. The whole building was dead quiet, and he was just there, staring at the floor like he was waiting for something. When he saw me, he didn't say a word, just turned and shuffled away. My heart was pounding, and I felt so powerless, like I was stuck in some game I didn't understand. I started locking my door every night, even when I was inside. The worst came a week later. I woke up in the middle of the night, maybe 2 a.m., to this faint scratching sound. At first, I thought it was the wind or something, but it was coming from inside my room, near the closet. I lay there, barely breathing, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But the sound kept going, slow and deliberate, like someone was dragging their nails across the wood. I'm not the bravest guy, but I couldn't just lie there. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the closet. My hands were shaking, and I felt so alone, like no one in the world could help me. I took a deep breath and yanked the door open. There was Frank, crouched in the dark, holding my missing key in one hand and a small knife in the other. His eyes were wide, locked on mine, and I screamed. Pure panic. He lunged at me, but he was slow, frail. I grabbed his wrist, twisted the knife away, and pinned him to the floor, yelling for help. My voice was shaking, and I felt like I was going to pass out. Some of my neighbors finally came running, and one called the cops. Frank didn't fight much, just went quiet, staring at me like I'd betrayed him. Later, the police told me he was the property manager's uncle with serious mental health issues, living there under the table. I felt bad for him, but that didn't change how trapped and helpless I'd felt, knowing he'd been watching me all along. Story 2. Hey there, my name's Susan, and I've been living in this quiet little neighborhood just outside Austin, Texas for about 20 years now with my husband Henry. It's a cozy 2-story house near a park, perfect for retirement, and we love it here. Our kids are all grown and off, living their own lives, so it's just me and Henry, enjoying the slower pace. I spend a lot of time on our front porch, knitting, reading, or just soaking in the breeze. Sometimes I'll listen to true crime podcasts, or some soft music to pass the time. Last year, someone new moved into the house across the street, which was exciting because that place had been empty for ages, and I was tired of staring at its blank windows. The new guy was young, maybe mid-20s, named Ryan. He drove this sleek, shiny SUV and always wore these flashy clothes, like he was heading to a photo shoot or something. I figured he was either loaded or trying real hard to look like it. Don't get me wrong though, Ryan was a sweetheart. A few days after he moved in, he came over to introduce himself, and he hit it off with Henry right away. They'd talk about sports, stocks, and Henry even dug up some old college stories I hadn't heard in years. Ryan said he worked freelance in media, doing stuff for some online influencer, which went over my head, but it seemed to pay well. He was charming, confident, and I thought, good for him. For a few months, everything was normal. I'd see Ryan coming and going, and he'd always wave at me from his driveway. I'd wave back, happy to have a friendly neighbor. But then, I started noticing this girl showing up at his place. She was young, blonde, drove a bright green convertible, and dressed in a way that, well, let's just say it raised my eyebrows a bit. I'm not one to judge, but it felt out of place in our quiet neighborhood. She'd pull up maybe once or twice a week, usually when Ryan wasn't home. I saw her let herself in with a key, stay for a bit, then leave. I assumed she was his girlfriend, maybe checking on the house or something. It made sense, but it still felt off. Like, why was she always there when he wasn't? I didn't say anything to Henry. He'd just tell me to mind my own business. But I couldn't help watching her. Our street is so calm, and I'm out on the porch all the time, so it's hard not to notice things. One evening, I saw Ryan pull into his driveway with her in the passenger seat, laughing together, which confirmed my guess that they were dating. But even then, I got this uneasy feeling like I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to. It wasn't anything specific, just this quiet sense that something wasn't right. I felt a little silly, like I was turning into the nosy neighbor from some television show, but I couldn't shake it. There was something about the way she moved, so deliberate, like she knew exactly what she was doing. And Ryan, for all his charm, seemed oblivious. I started paying closer attention, not because I wanted to pry, but because I felt like no one else was noticing. It was just me, out on my porch, watching this strange pattern unfold, wondering what I was missing and feeling like I was the only one who cared. So, after seeing Ryan and that girl Emily together in his car, I thought I had it all figured out. They were just a young couple, maybe hitting a rough patch. But that uneasy feeling I had didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. A few days later, I was out watering my garden when I heard shouting from across the street. It was Ryan and Emily standing in his driveway, going at it. She was yelling, throwing her hands up, her face all red, while Ryan just stood there, looking frustrated. I couldn't make out the words, but the way she was acting, I thought she might actually hit him. Finally, she stormed off, slammed her car door, and peeled out of the neighborhood. Ryan shook his head and went inside, like he was used to it. I felt bad for him, but I also felt like I was watching something private, something I wasn't supposed to see. It left me rattled, like I was too close to their mess. After that, Emily kept showing up at his house, always when Ryan wasn't there. I'd see her green convertible pull up. She'd let herself in, stay for maybe an hour, then leave. It didn't add up. If they were fighting, why was she still coming over? I mentioned it to Henry, but he just said I was being nosy and to let the kid live his life. I tried, but it was hard to ignore when it was happening right across the street. I started feeling like I was the only one noticing, like I was stuck watching this slow-motion train wreck with no way to stop it. Then, one night, everything fell apart. Henry and I were asleep when sirens woke us up, loud, blaring, right outside. We rushed to the porch and saw police cars and an ambulance swarming Ryan's house. My heart sank. A few neighbors were out, whispering, but no one knew what was going on. Then I saw Emily being led out in handcuffs, her face blank, like she was in a trance. She didn't fight or scream, just stared straight ahead. Moments later, paramedics brought Ryan out on a stretcher. He was conscious, but he looked rough, pale, shaken, his shirt torn. I gasped, feeling helpless, like I should have done something to prevent this. For a week, we didn't see Ryan. I was worried sick, replaying every moment I'd seen Emily at his house, wondering if I could have warned him. When he finally came back, Henry and I went over to check on him. He let us in, looking tired but willing to talk. He told us everything. Emily wasn't supposed to have a key. She'd stolen his spare and made a copy. She'd been tracking his phone, showing up when he wasn't home. And worst of all, she'd hidden cameras in his house. The fight I'd seen was Ryan trying to break things off, but she wouldn't let go. When he pushed harder, she snapped, showing up one night with a knife. He managed to fight her off, but not without getting hurt. The police found the cameras and her copied key, and she confessed to it all. Ryan was a wreck, saying he'd learned his lesson about flashing his money around. Not long after, he moved out, saying he didn't feel safe anymore. I felt so powerless, like I'd watched this whole thing unfold and couldn't do a thing to help. I still think about Ryan, hoping he's okay, but that feeling of being too late never quite goes away. Story 3. Hey, I'm Caleb, and this story is about something that happened when I moved to a new place in a quiet suburb just outside Denver, Colorado. I was in my late 20s looking for a fresh start after a bad breakup that made staying in my old city impossible. I'd come into some money a while back, not crazy rich, but enough to buy a small house in this nice low-crime neighborhood full of families and wide lawns. The houses were spread out, which I loved, but for some reason the huge place next door was weirdly close to mine, like it didn't quite fit the layout. When I first saw it, I thought a big family must live there. Grandparents, kids, the works, but I was so wrong. I wanted to be a good neighbor, not some loner, so I made a point to introduce myself to everyone around. I saved the next door neighbor for last, mostly because their house was so intimidating, all modern and massive. By the time I got to their doorstep, I was wiped out from small talk with parents and professionals who all seemed way more put together than me. I knocked, expecting another middle-aged couple, but this guy it felt off, like he was dodging me. I shrugged it off, asked if he had roommates in that huge house, and he said no, he lived alone, which blew my mind. Who needs that much space? We chatted a bit more, and he gave me his number before heading back inside. I walked away, excited to have a neighbor my age, but also confused. Why was he so cagey? Over the next few weeks, I tried texting Mason to hang out, but he always had an excuse. Work, meetings, whatever. I didn't push it, figuring he was just busy, but I started noticing how weirdly isolated he was. His car was always in the driveway, but I never saw delivery guys, friends, or even a date show up. No pizza boxes, no Amazon packages, nothing. It was like he didn't exist outside that house. I work from home, and my office is upstairs with a view of his place, so I glance over sometimes. Not to be creepy, just curious. It felt like I was the only one who even noticed him. The neighborhood was so quiet, and I was on my own a lot, which made it hard not to fixate on this guy who seemed to live like a shadow. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was up with Mason, like he was hiding something, and I was stuck watching from the outside, with no way to figure out what. So, a few months after meeting Mason, I'd pretty much given up on hanging out with him. He kept dodging my texts, and I wasn't about to beg for his time. But his house, that giant place next door, stayed on my mind. It was too quiet, too empty for someone his age. I'd glance over from my office window and see nothing. No visitors, no movement, just his car sitting there. It made me feel like I was living next to a void, and being alone in my own house, a lot didn't help. Then, one Wednesday night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to loud music blasting from Mason's place. I sleep with my windows open, so it hit me hard. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but no, it was real. Pounding bass, voices, laughter. I looked out and saw 6 or 7 cars lined up in his driveway, lights on inside like a full-blown party. It was so out of character for Mason, but I wasn't mad, just confused. I figured I'd walk over, ask him to turn it down, and maybe finally get a glimpse of what he was about. I threw on a jacket and headed across. The music was even louder up close, but when I knocked, no one answered. I knocked harder, nothing. I almost texted Mason but stopped myself, knowing he'd probably ignore me. Then, on a whim, I tried the door, and it just opened. That alone felt wrong. Inside, I saw a pile of shoes in the entryway, at least a dozen pairs, but the house was dead silent, except for the music. No people, no drinks, no party mess. I stepped further in, heart pounding, and realized the music wasn't music.it, was a recording of a party, looping laughter and clinking glasses. My stomach twisted. Why would anyone fake a party? I should have left, but I needed to know what was going on. I crept through the house, feeling like an intruder in this massive, empty place. Then I saw a door cracked open, leading to a basement. Something told me that's where the answers were. I went down, each step creaking, the fake party sounds fading behind me. At the bottom, a faint light spilled from another door, and I heard a new noise. A low, rhythmic grinding, like machinery. It smelled sharp, like bleach or some heavy cleaner. I inched closer, peering through the crack. 3 older guys, not Mason, stood there in work boots, thick gloves, and goggles, staring at something I couldn't see. They didn't look like party guests. They looked like they were working on something serious. The grinding got louder, and that bleach smell hit me hard. I felt this cold dread, like I'd stumbled into something I was never meant to see. I backed away, heart racing, but then the light behind me dimmed, like someone closed the door. I didn't wait to find out why. I bolted up the stairs, through the house, and out the front door, not stopping until I was back in my place, locking every bolt. From my darkened office, I watched Mason's house. A few minutes later, a group of men spilled out, scanning the street, arguing, but Mason wasn't with them. The music stopped, and they went back inside. I sat there, alone, trying to make sense of it. The cars were gone by morning, including Mason's. He never came back. His house is empty now, packages piling up, grass growing wild. I feel like I saw something I shouldn't have, but who would believe me? I'm just stuck here, watching, with no answers.